Okay, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about the combat changes in Age of Sigmar 4th Edition. The biggest ones are that all the weapon ranges are going to 3 inches for melee weapons, and that this pile in move works a little bit differently. We're also getting tighter coherency. Uh, Here, we're getting half inch coherency instead of 1 inch, and you take some damage when you retreat. These are fairly small changes. I like both of them. I like the coherency change because of the other changes, because we've got 3 inch range on our weapons, and because the pile-in is a bit more permissive. This would be really constrictive if we didn't have those changes, but now, yeah, you're a little bit tighter together, but because you have 3 inch weapon range, it actually feels like your unit takes up a lot more space when it's in combat than it otherwise would. So the coherency doesn't feel, or at least I don't think it will feel, really restrictive and choking. If anything, I think it'll clean the board up a little bit and sort of make units a bit more coherent, right? Retreating, I like this change mostly because it's really annoying if your opponent has like 1 or 2 wounds left in their unit and they retreat, and then you have to spend an entire turn moving and charging down 1 or 2 clan rats or one last liberator. And retreat just gives you a good chance that you might automatically get that kill. Um, Outside of that, I'm not sure it'll do too much in the game, but in general, I like that combat is a little bit sticky. And if you look at the pile-in rules, combat is a bit stickier there as well. Once you're in combat with something, it's kind of difficult to leave combat with it without penalizing yourself. And I think that'll be good for the game overall, although it's hard to predict. So the big changes are the 3 inch weapon range. At the moment, there is a bit of skill expression in setting your units up to take advantage of the different weapon ranges. I find mostly it's gotcha stuff though, especially if you're not very good at the game. You'll set your army up so that maybe a hero is within 3 of a screen and your opponent's just able to sneak their Terrorgeist in or something and kill that hero when you thought he was protected. And over time, you just learn to put things 3 inches back. I don't find that kind of gameplay, the little nuances between 2 inch and 3 inch weapons, very interesting personally. But I know there are people who do, and I'm sure those people will miss that sort of gameplay. There was always a sort of formation thing you could do. So I'll jump over to Tabletop Simulator and show you what I mean there. If you had a unit, these units are not great for it, but if you imagine having a screen unit like these Chaos Warriors, and then you had a more powerful unit like Be'lakor, and you put that guy 2.5 inches from the front here, so he's 2.5 inches. If you charge into this screen, then you're going to be in range of Be'lakor for combat range, but you're going to be out of range to attack Be'lakor. So you couldn't come in here and just kill Be'lakor because you don't have 3 inch weapon range at the moment. You could kill the screen, but then because the screen's out of the way, then Be'lakor will be able to move in and deal a bunch of damage back. So there's a little bit of like protecting a more powerful unit with a screen, and it sort of bubble wraps them a little bit, and you won't be able to do that nearly as well in the new edition. If I charge Andraste into this screen, I'll be within 3 inches of Be'lakor and I'll be able to attack Be'lakor. So that is something that there was a fair bit of skill expression in bubble wrapping units, and especially when you were getting double turned, it's a big part of the game is screening, and this is a kind of screening. So I think people will miss that, but I think the gains in general of not having to measure 30 different models outweigh the loss of the skill expression that you get from having different weapon ranges. There are a few issues in measuring as well. Like, just if you're measuring a 1 inch thing, then and you have an error of like half an inch in your measurement, then that's a huge portion of the measurement. Like the error is a big part of whether or not you're in range. And so it's a bad idea to have important measurements have short distances, just because there's a really big margin of error. And having to measure like 30 guys where you can't get your widget between the models. There's no space anywhere in a combat. You're often measuring like if your back rank can attack over your front rank. So, for example, if you're measuring a charge, if I'm measuring this distance, I can put a measuring stick on the ground between them and see, like, is this a 7 or an 8-inch charge? Well, I can fit tools between them to measure it really precisely. But once I'm in combat, if I'm measuring, is this Chaos Warrior in range? Well, I have to fit a tool. I have to look over the top of another model. So it's very hard to measure. And just in practical terms, it was a bit tedious and a bit annoying to do that. And I'm sort of glad that we don't have to do it nearly as much. Because with 3-inch reach and with tight coherency, you're going to be in range almost all of the time. And with the pile-in the way it is. So overall, I'm really happy about the 3-inch range change. I think it'll just make things faster and easier, and you don't have to worry as much about all those sorts of things. All right, so I think I want to talk a bit about pile-in, because the pile-in rules have changed fairly substantially, and they've changed in 2 ways. So the first part is that you pick a target now. Before, you used to have to pile in, each model had to pile towards the closest unit. But now you pick a target that you're in combat with, and you can pile all of the models in your unit toward that. So I'll show you what that means. But before that, the other change is that you can't leave combat with units that you're in combat with. Remember how I spoke about this retreat rule making combat a bit sticky? This is the other part of that. You actually can't pile out of combat, whereas at the moment you can. So I'll show you both of those sorts of things. So just that piling out of combat thing, we'll give an example. We've got these 10 Chaos Warriors and a Chaos Chariot. And let's say you've got these guys, these Retributors, in combat with both of them. If you measure the range here, these Chaos Warriors definitely in 3 inches of them. Might even move the Retributors a little bit further away. So the Chaos Warriors are within 3 inches of the Retributors, and they'll get to activate at the moment. But if the Retributors activate first and move so that they can get out of 3 inches, so that pile in, they're all closer to this chariot, so they're piled towards the chariot. Now they're outside of 3 inches, and the Chaos Warriors don't get to activate at all. You can't do that in the new edition. You can't pile out of combat with a unit. You can still pile into combat, you can still draw in new units, but you can't get out of combat just by using the piling mechanics. That means you can pin units, but it doesn't work very well. I'll show you in a second, but they would have to leave at least one Retributor within 3 inches. And because of the weapon range changes, when these guys pile in 3 inches, they're going to have a fair number of models that are in range, right? These Chaos Warriors might get 6 warriors in combat here, whereas before you could pile out of combat with the warriors entirely and just ignore them. So this is massive, and it'll be something that I think will take people a little bit to adjust to. One of the most common tricks I see in the game is using these little pile-in shenanigans. It separates when you just start playing the game. You fall for all these things like 10 times in a row, and then you start to use them yourself. It's a big part of the game in my mind, and it's not necessarily the best part of the game. Like I don't love these little tricks, the tiny fiddly nuanced tricks. So I think it'll create different gameplay, and it's gameplay I'm really excited to see. So that's one half of it. You can't pile out of combat. And then the other part is changing the requirement so that you don't have to pile towards the closest enemy unit. Like each model doesn't have to pile towards the closest. They can just pick any unit they're in combat with. So if we have that same situation where these Retributors are in combat with the Chaos Chariot and with the Warriors, they've got to be just within 3 of the Warriors. 2.6. All right, so you can see that every Paladin, every Retributor is closer to this chariot than they are to the Chaos Warriors. In the current rules, they would all have to pile at least no further away from this chariot. So they wouldn't be able to get any attacks into these Chaos Warriors because they only have 2-inch reach and they're more than 2 inches away and they can't get any closer to the Warriors. But with the new rules, the Retributors can activate and pick the Warriors as a target and then just pile this way. It's totally fine. The only thing they have to keep in mind is that they have to stay within 3 inches of that Chaos Chariot. So they have to end up about there. And that'll leave them all in range of the Chaos Warriors, especially now that they have 3-inch reach. I guess, before you're thinking maybe you would have one Retributor, maybe 2 Retributors in range. Now you can pile this way very easily, get all of your Retributors in range to deal damage. 3 inches in range to deal damage to these Chaos Warriors. So before, in the old rules, you wouldn't be able to attack the Warriors at all because of the way piling was written. Now, in this new situation, you can attack the Warriors. It's a very big change to how flexible your units are while in combat. All right. So I did say that you can still pin. In the past, you'd be able to pin units. Let's say you have this unit of Warriors, and you want to sort of interrupt them, make it difficult for them to get attacks on you. And what you might do is charge either end of them with a unit, and because they have to pile in towards the closest unit, they have to sort of move some guys this way and some guys towards Indrasta, and they have to leave a couple guys in the middle, just sort of standing around keeping coherency, right? Pinning is still possible, but I'd argue it's much harder because you have the higher weapon range. Like with 3-inch reach, every single one of these warriors is currently in range to attack. So it's hard to pin like this because you still have to get within 1/2 inch when you charge. So they get 2.5 inches of extra range. You're really getting into combat with the other unit. You can still do it. So if there's some extra units sitting around, like let's say we have Be'lakor is probably a bad example because he's a bit too powerful. But if we have 2 Chaos Chariots on either side of our warriors here, and I'll move this one back a little bit. Like Injusta charges on this side, and she tries to get just within 3 inches of this unit of warriors. And the Paladins charge on this side, and they try to get just within 3 inches of this guy. This unit of warriors is kind of stuck. They can still pick a target. They can say like, oh yes, we're going to pick Indrasta, and we're going to pile towards Indrasta. But they can't leave this combat. They're not allowed to leave this combat. So they can't just move like this and fight Indrasta. They can't do something like this because the coherency rules are still really strict. They're still 1/2 inch. So they can, if they're bunched up like this, they can do a bit of, I'm going to space out 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch here, and maintain coherency, but still get some attacks into Indrasta, maybe 4 guys. And these 6 guys, or these 5 guys will be out of combat. This 1 guy will be able to attack there. So you still can pin, but it is very hard to do. It's very hard to find this opportunity because like here we're having to charge the chariots. Otherwise we're ending up very close to the unit. Your unit is very resistant to pinning if they're base to base in the first place, because then they can spread that little 1/2 inch thing and get more distance out of it. And in general, I think you'll see a lot less pinning, but you will see that moving around in combat, and there'll still be lots of sort of pile in shenanigans. So I'm really curious to see how these changes pan out. Actually, before I move on, I want to show one more example of. Oh no, I did show that. Yeah, I showed how the pinning. Yeah, just the ordinary pinning. If you just do this, doesn't work very well. Even though they can't spread the unit out, just the fact of the long melee range means that they get pretty much all their attacks. Yeah. All right. I think I will leave it there. Very excited for these new combat changes. I think overall it's going to make combat much faster. You don't have to spend as much time carefully positioning every single model. When you take into account some of the other changes, like with the coherency and with the terrain rules, which I haven't had a look at yet, but if you look at things like unstable, and let's pretend Be'lakor is a piece of unstable terrain, like you don't have to worry about, do I place this model on the unstable terrain or whatever. You can't do that, but you often don't have to because of the range of your melee weapons and because you've got this flexible pile-in. So I think those two changes together are going to make combat really fast, really easy. I've heard people in the past describe the ideal as like being able to put your hands in this shape. I think this might have been Haywo, and just like push your unit into combat, and that's the pile-in. We're very close to that. The units just stay in a big block. They move into combat. There's still a lot of skill expression. I think they'll happen in combat activation order. It'll happen in buffs, and it'll happen in positioning and all those sorts of things. There's still, because you've got this flexibility, you can still use a lot of movement in the pile-in phase to get your guys in range of buffs, or you can position so that it pulls the enemy out of range of buffs and things like that. The fact that like big monsters only have to be within 3 inches to get in combat, all of those sorts of things, I think it's going to lead to a really fast, fluid, and fun combat phase. And I'm really excited about it. And overall, looking past all of the other stuff, like I've got some issues with covering fire, and we're seeing some of the faction focused stuff, and I think some of the faction rules are a bit dodgy. Some of the core stuff, like combat ranges, looks really, really good to me, and I'm really excited to use these rules. So I'll leave it there for that one. Probably a short video. We'll have a bit of a look at, I think, spells next time, and then I might cover terrain, and I'm not sure, I might do battle packs. I think in the future I'm not going to do the faction focuses. I'm going to wait for the indexes, and then I'll try. I know I don't make videos very regularly, but I'll try and do each of the indexes, mostly because I want to read them all. I want to know every faction's rules. It's a sort of unique opportunity in terms of, in the past, you would have to buy all the battle tomes to really get access to the rules, or you'd have to, I guess you could read them all on Wikipedia. There's a lot of rules, so it's a big project, but with 4th edition, they're paring them back. They're a lot more simplified, so it's a good time to get a handle on how every single faction works. And I want to wait until after just the faction focuses, until we get the full indexes, because some of these faction focuses look very weak or very weird, or are clearly missing some information, and we need to see sort of more of it. So I'll leave it there, and I guess subscribe if you're interested in hearing analysis about the endless spells and terrain and those indexes when they come out. Have a good one.